Joining us now is Dore, former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations and current president of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. He also served as foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Senator.
First of all, did you see the Fox interview yesterday with Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I did.
Did you glean anything from that you thought was noteworthy?
You have to understand that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been doing interviews since the 1980s in English on American network television. And he's a real expert, and I think there are many things, many cards he preferred to keep close to his chest. Mm-hmm. So while right now the electronic media want to talk about Tom Clancy scenarios of Israeli aircraft flying towards Iran, he's not going to go into that. And therefore, I can't say that even an expert eye could take something from the way he played that.
Yeah. Well, he obviously was not going to engage in hypotheticals, but he seemed to be, unabashed in his position that it would be catastrophic for Iran to have a nuclear capability, and he laid out in some detail what that would mean. And to me, he seemed to be keeping the pressure on primarily Barack Obama. In order to do something about that. And, of course, President Obama has set a September deadline for progress out of Iran. It hasn't come about it. In the meantime, he had the speech in Cairo where he seemed to put the settlement issue first and foremost. And now Abbas has been Abbas, the Palestinian leader, is taking the position that that's a precondition to negotiations, and now they seem to be coming off of that a bit. How do you read that? Is Obama and Abbas coming off of that position that the Israelis must pull back these settlements before negotiations can be entered into?
Well, I'll be really frank with you. I think the Obama administration made a huge error by insisting that Israelis freeze any construction in their Israeli settlements and towns, villages in the West Bank. This is disputed territory where Israel has claims to defensible borders, the Palestinians have claims to a state, and we're going to have to eventually negotiate a settlement on where a boundary is going to be located. In the meantime, the Palestinians are building in their villages and their towns, and Israel has settlements that has people who have needs, and to say that Israel should freeze its settlements while the Palestinians continue theirs in a territorial dispute seems unfair, particularly since Israel pulled out 9,000 settlers from the Gaza Strip and proved that the pouring of concrete is not going to predetermine the outcome of a peace settlement or even any kind of territorial settlement between us and our neighbors. But nonetheless, what happened was, since the Oslo Accords were first signed in 1993 on the White House lawn under President Clinton, until January 2009, the freezing of settlement activity on the Israeli side was never a precondition for negotiations. Israelis and Palestinians negotiated all through the 1990s, no settlement freeze. In the last 7, 8, 9 years, they've been negotiating, no settlement freeze. And so what happened was President Obama introduced the settlement freeze as a precondition. And that's something that I think the entire Israeli political spectrum found very problematic.
And did he not then give Abbas cover for taking that very position?
Well, Abbas basically said, look, if you're going to give me this present,
yes,
I'll take it. And therefore that became the Palestinian position. And the Palestinian position became more hard line. And Abbas actually grew very comfortable not having negotiations with Israel. He got more support from people who sympathize with Hamas. And then suddenly he had to come to the United States, to the United Nations, and come to the meeting. But up until now, he has said, and I think it's still his position, that an Israeli freeze is a precondition for negotiations.
So it seems to me like, of course, you've been living with this for several years, but
Right.
just looking at it from the outside, it seems to me like that we start this process off now, not even where we've been in the past.
No, we've made it much more difficult.
We've made it more difficult. We're not starting off even. This is a tough thing. Everybody's tried to reach a settlement, and it's never been done.
Right.
And we're trying to get them in the same room. But now the president interjected something in there that you've just been talking about that made it even more difficult. So we got to get past that hurdle even to get back where we were.
To get back to step one. Now, to make also, something else has to be clarified. Unlike the period in the past, we are now in a position where Iran is about to cross the nuclear threshold. And we have to understand the meaning of that, because Iran is not just a problem for Israel. That's what you hear when you listen to the media a lot in the UK, in France, or in the United States. Iran is first and foremost a problem for the Arabs. These are Persian Shiites against Arab Sunni Muslims. And Iran, for example, this year claimed that Bahrain, an independent Arab kingdom, a member of the United Nations, is a province of Iran. It's Iranian territory. It's an independent country. They have their Revolutionary Guards active in supplying weapons to the Taliban against U.S. troops in Afghanistan. They've been supplying to the Shiite militias in Iraq. They have been busy operating all over the Middle East. In Egypt, 49 Hezbollah members. Hezbollah is the terrorist arm of Iranian intelligence. They were caught in Egypt operating. So you have Iran operating in the whole Middle East. They supply two very important Palestinian terrorist organizations directly, Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas. We say that if the Iran problem is not addressed, any Palestinian-Israeli settlement you reach is going to be washed away by a tsunami of Iranian power.
It will put in jeopardy the oil supply in the region. It will provide a nuclear umbrella for terrorism.
That is a very important point.
It would do all of those things. So where does that leave the Arab world? Are they just going to, they're as smart as we are they just going to sit back and let this take its own course?
Can you just repeat that last point?
Are they just going to sit back and let the Iranians develop nuclear weapons?
Well, here's a problem. I mean, the administration and its allies in the G8 said last July that the Iranians have till September, and you made reference to this in the beginning,
yes,
to come up with a serious proposal for dealing with their nuclear program. The Iranians are now in violation of at least a half a dozen UN Security Council resolutions, which have called on them to suspend the enrichment of uranium. They're totally defying these resolutions. So they had to come up with a proposal, and if they didn't, the United States would move to far more severe measures against Iran, starting out with severe sanctions. That was the plan. But what happened in September? In September, the Iranians gave the P5+1, that's the permanent members of the Security Council in Germany, a new proposal, 5 pages. And in that 5-page proposal, you basically have a lot of drivel. You have generalities about the changing nature of the world order, the need for general global disarmament, but no concrete Iranian proposal. In fact, the State Department spokesman said, not last Thursday, the Thursday before last, that this is an inadequate proposal. The next day, the same State Department spokesman announced the United States was going to begin negotiations with Iran. So when you take a deadline, in the Middle East, if you draw a line in the sand, you say you've got a deadline in September, and then the guy doesn't meet the deadline, and then you take your stick and you erase that line in the sand, you invite aggression.
Mr. Ambassador, let me bring it up to date for you. And the president, a few minutes ago, gets up there on the world stage and seems to prioritize global denuclearization over the need to stop Iran from developing and North Korea.
See, there's a big problem here, and this is my view. I wrote a book on the UN years ago, and I just wrote a book on Iran called The Rise of Nuclear Iran. Now, the problem here is you can't view everybody the same way. This is not a constitutional system where everybody has equal rights.
Exactly.
There are countries that are aggressors, and there are countries that are trying to provide a legitimate defense against aggression.
Nobody wants to be judgmental. And
right, everyone's got a narrative. We're in a kind of new post.
Yes, we're all equal here.
Now, that frankly, is how you make a big mistake. So if you talk about global disarmament, you're going to have the United States give up its Trident and its Minuteman forces, while the Iranians, then can say, okay, now we'll give up 3 of our Shihab-3 missiles.
Well,
you shouldn't be in that position.
The administration is prioritizing nuclear disarmament. That's part of the reason why they did what they did with regard to the missile defense decision. They want to get the Russians to agree to a new disarmament deal, and it looks like prioritizing that over the most dangerous situation facing the world down there. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for being with us. I appreciate that very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Senator, for having me.